Given your experience with UK-US relations and what you mentioned earlier about common defense interests, where do you see the US and Britain with NATO in the next few years, especially post-Brexit?
Post-Brexit, you see, I think that European defense, that is to say, European Union defense, has never really been a serious proposition. I mean, there have been some things that have been, some initiatives done, some weapons procurement, some small military formations have been put together under an EU banner. But Brexit is not really going to make much difference to how we decide to orient our defense and integrate it into our national security policy, into our foreign policy. I don't think it makes a great deal of difference. We will still, defense-wise, be extremely active, we hope, with the United States, with Canada on your side of the Atlantic, and with the European states of NATO. We still believe in NATO, although its original rationale disappeared a long time ago. And so the thing that has caused us a lot of angst has been President Trump blowing hot and cold on NATO, and he's got it right in saying that European members of NATO don't spend enough money on their defense. The United States has been saying that ever since I've been a diplomat, or ever since I was a diplomat. The first NATO meeting I ever went to, which was in the mid-80s, the top item on the agenda was what was called in those days burden sharing. And burden sharing was effectively the United States turning up in Brussels and saying to the Europeans and to Canada, would you please spend more on your defense? Otherwise, we're going to do something horrible. And the Europeans basically didn't do it. But I mean, even in those days, we were spending 4%, I think, of our GDP or GNP on defense, and that has now gone down to about 2.5%. So it has always been an American complaint. So what I am hoping is whether Trump or Biden win in November, in Trump's second term, if possible, in Biden's first term, there'll be a real attempt to restore the cohesion and effectiveness of NATO. And one of the things we're going to have to decide will be on that agenda is not simply how many troops do you station in Estonia to deter Russian incursions. We're going to have to think, because NATO now acts out of area, to use the jargon, much more than it used to, whether there's anything that the organization should do vis-a-vis China and freedom of navigation in the South China Seas, or whether that's going to be a question of a coalition of the willing, say, US, UK, maybe France, Japan, Malaysia, Philippines, to deal with Chinese expansionism, particularly in the South China Seas. So I don't think NATO is doomed, but I would be happier with a Biden presidency than with a Trump second presidency, because I happen to know from earlier days Tony Blinken, who I think would be Joe Biden's national security advisor or maybe his chief of staff. And I remember Tony was a great supporter of NATO.